Hey everybody, I am hoping this is the end-all be-all video for you guys when it comes to doing a welfare analysis. What does that mean? Defining things like the government revenue from a tax, or the impact on third parties of an externality, or of course, consumer surplus and producer surplus, okay? Those are things we're talking about when we're talking about doing a welfare analysis. How is it impacting different groups? And here's the deal, guys. When you're studying microeconomics, there's only 4 groups possible, okay? You don't even always have 4 groups at play, but the 4 groups, the most you could have is 4 groups. And what are those 4 groups? Consumer and producer, those are the market participants. Of course, you're always gonna have consumer and producer when you do a welfare analysis because we have a market-based economy. Then you can also have the government intervening either with a tax or a subsidy. So the government could be impacted either with getting revenue or there's outlays. And then you've got third parties, okay? And we are ready to go on all of that stuff, all right? So here it is. I'm probably not going to make it in time. I got a bell that's coming, but I'm going to try to keep this as fast as I can. So here we go. We are going to do consumer surplus because that's a demand curve. That's the consumer. Producer surplus because I've got a supply curve. Here I'm going to do government revenue. I'm going to bring in a tax and talks about it. And then here I've got different externalities we're going to talk about and how to see the impact on third parties, okay? So let's start it. We are thinking vertically. That is the key, okay? When you think about consumer surplus, producer surplus, government revenue, or government outlay, if you did a subsidy, we're going to do a tax, or the impact on third parties, that is all associated with goods. That's right. Goods provide surplus to the consumer, okay? And the goods are going to be here, right? On this horizontal axis, you're going to have a good, a good, a good, a good, a good. But yes, they're on the horizontal axis, but we're going to be looking at verticals right over the good. That's the key thing. We're going to be looking at verticals over each good on this axis. You've got to think vertically, and if you do, it can be so unbelievably easy what we are doing, okay? So again, goods provide consumers with surplus. It's when producers sell goods that they get producer surplus, right? It's when they sell those goods, that's when they get surplus. The government gets revenue, right? So we're going to do a tax when a good is bought and sold, right? When a good is bought and sold, it's a per unit tax is what we're doing. Third parties are impacted when a good is produced or a good is consumed. So it's all about the goods. And since it's all about the goods, it's about that vertical over the goods. And if you don't understand me, just pay attention. Now, demand curve, that is based on the marginal private benefit. It's really a bunch of dots, and each one of these dots sits over a good, right? Each dot that makes up this line sits over a good. And what we are showing is the private benefit of consuming the good to the consumer. So what else do we need? We need the cost, the per unit cost. Well, what's the per unit cost of acquiring the good to the consumer? It's the price, right? So we're gonna put in our price. I'm gonna put PC for just price consumer. And guess what? So what is going to be the consumer surplus? All you ever basically need to do is find the NPB, which is the demand curve that's showing the benefits, find your price, and guys, it's those verticals that sit over the good. So imagine there's a good there, a good there, a good there. It's these verticals that sit over the good. If the price went down and you were asked, show me the change in consumer surplus, it is so easy. The price goes down. You know, we're going to extend that surplus for all of these units right there. And now we're going to buy more units. Why are we going to buy more units? Because now for these many more units right there, the benefits exceed the cost. And we're going to get some surplus for those additional units. That's consumer surplus. Producer surplus, they get it when they sell a good. Their curve is the MPC. The MPC is also a bunch of dots. It's made up of a bunch of dots. And guess what? Those dots are right over goods. Why? Because we are showing the private cost of producing a good, right? Now, what is the benefit? We need the benefits for the producer. Well, that's the price, right? Price producer is the benefit. Just go find price producer. You've got the benefits. There's a bunch of goods down there. The difference right here, that vertical that sits over goods, those verticals, that's the producer surplus. So we're just going to keep going. Kind of smudged it pretty good there. So see if I can bring that right back. So I think that was MPC. Just to remind you that the line is MPC. And we're going to get these verticals sitting over the goods. We're thinking vertically. Each of these goods, that's when they get the surplus, as long as their price is above the cost of supplying the good, okay? And so we now head to the government. I'm going to bring in my tax wedge. Bring in that tax wedge. There we go. What does that tax wedge do? It separates the PC from the PP by the amount of the per unit tax, okay? And what else does it do? It's going to reduce how much we are supplying and demanding, right? The quantity demanded is going to reduce, the quantity supply is going to reduce. So the quantity supplied and demanded are both going to reduce. So we were at Q free market, now we're at Q tax. These are all the goods that are going to be provided, right? No more than that. QS and QD have been reduced by the tax, and so no more goods. And when am I going to get revenue? When's the government going to get revenue, okay? Every time a good is bought and sold. So over each one of these goods, we can say they're going to get revenue. How much revenue? Well, the per unit tax, right? The per unit tax. So guess what? That is the government revenue. And if we brought in a subsidy instead, okay, it would still be verticals over each good all the way to where QS and QD would be equaling, and that subsidy would increase QS and QD, and it would still be basically a rectangle. It's going to be a rectangle, okay? We're getting a per unit amount above each good. Third parties, okay? Third parties. This causes all kinds of issues for students, all right? Here's the deal. You've got what type of externality here? Well, let's go ahead and title this MSB. The total benefit to society is less than the private benefit. This is a negative externality from consumption. Here's my MSB. The total benefit, thinking vertically, right? The total benefit is greater than the private benefit, okay? So we've got a positive externalities. Third parties must be benefiting in this situation. Third parties are being hurt. What do we have here? We've got a marginal social cost. It looks like I smudged my MPC. There it is. Private cost to the producer. The total cost is above, right? It's above. We're thinking vertically. There's an additional cost. Each good that is produced is going to have an additional cost. Thinking vertically, negative externality from production. Now, once you have that, find your output, okay? Let's just say we're going to go with, in all of these, we're going to go with the tax, even the positive externality, which we shouldn't do, but anyhow, let's start here. Q market, draw that vertical up. This parallelogram is the impact on third parties, okay? So we could easily just say, hey, it's these verticals right there. And those verticals are, again, above goods. That is going to be the cost to third parties. If we came in with a tax and pushed the quantity to the left, decreased the quantity, and now the output was right here, guess what? We would get rid of that harm associated with these goods that are no longer being produced. These goods are no longer being produced, right? So we're going to get rid of that, and now third parties are only going to be impacted by this area right there. That's their harm now. Their harm was reduced. How much was their harm reduced? By this shape right there, okay? That parallelogram, no longer having that harm. Let's do it here, okay? Again, positive externality, we shouldn't do a tax, but we're going to do a tax just to make it consistent, so quantity market, all right? Third parties are benefiting by this parallelogram, and it is for sure a parallelogram. That vertical is the per unit externality. It's the benefit third parties are getting. If we did a tax, which we shouldn't do, bad policy move, we do a tax, we're going to reduce our output. All of these benefits are going to go away, okay? So now the third parties are only getting this parallelogram, that parallelogram. They're no longer getting this parallelogram. Remember, probably would have been best in this situation to subsidize, but that's not the point of this video. It's just to understand how to do this stuff. Finally, negative externality again, okay? So negative externality from production this time. We've got our quantity market. Draw that straight up. Oh, I want to find the impact on third parties. What's my impact? Well, it's going to be this parallelogram. There it is. It's those verticals. What are those verticals? Those are the per unit harm to the third parties, and they're getting harmed when a good, again, a good is produced or consumed. Now a tax happens, right? You get your Q tax right there, draw it up. Oops, not the best vertical ever drawn, but anyhow, you draw that up, and what's going to happen? These are going to be removed. They're no longer going to happen because we're not producing these goods. Since we're not producing those goods, these verticals are going to go away, and we're going to be left just with that parallelogram. There's that bell, but I'm just about done. What happened? We reduced cost to the third parties of that parallelogram right there. And that bell means I need to stop. But here's the thing, guys. I just have to implore you, please, 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 when you do welfare analysis, it's about thinking vertically. Consumer surplus comes from goods. Producer surplus comes from goods. Third parties are impacted when a good is produced or consumed. Governments get revenue when a good is bought and sold. So what we want to do is think about the verticals that lie above goods. And if we do, man, welfare analysis can be easy. That's right, it can be easy. Microeconomics for stakeholders. What are they? Consumers and producers always could have the government, and we could have third parties. Third parties if there's externalities, government if it's intervening with a tax or a subsidy. See you in the next video. Hope that made sense.